Good evening, everyone. Welcome to what I hope becomes an annual tradition with maybe some more in-person attendees, a budget town hall to ring in the delivery of the mayor's estimate to City Council. We did that today at 12 o'clock this afternoon. We wheeled an actual cart of books with about 25 of these up to the council chambers. So again, whether we're here with us in person or via the live stream, welcome. It really is a privilege to be here with you and have the opportunity to talk about the 2023 mayor's estimate, give you a sense of what actually goes into the city's budget, the process, and really help our residents understand where our money comes from, where it goes, and how we're proposing to use it in 2023. Before we get into this year's budget, I did want to take a few moments and discuss a few key outcomes from 2022. A few of them are really budget specific, and then also just highlighting some operational highlights from the year. First, as many who were paying attention to the budget process last year, we did begin the year with a $62 million structural deficit. And what that means in lay terms is our income was short of our expenses by $62 million. We were able to balance our budget, which we are required to do under state law, by using money that is in effect in our savings account, which is fine to do from time to time when times are tough, but is not a good way for us to handle our finances in the long term. And so you'll see when we get to the 2023 discussion, we have eliminated that problem, at least for this year. And we do have a structurally balanced budget in the amount of $225,000. Another thing from 2022 is that we were able, with some of the funds we received from the federal government under the American Rescue Plan Act, we deposited $20 million in our rainy day fund, which is a source of money for us to use in the event of financial difficulties. And we also created and then transferred $90 million into a payroll reserve fund, which is there for us to use to pay for accrued vacation time, sick time that employees have when they leave employment with the city, and also to pay for the 27th pay period that can arise periodically based on how our pay schedule. In a normal year, there are 26 pay periods. In 2024, however, there will be an extra pay period because we pay every other Wednesday. And as a result of that, we'll have a payday that falls on a holiday. And whenever that happens, we move it a day forward. And so it'll be a third pay period in December of 2024. And that's a real amount of money we're talking about. That's, I think, using an average payroll from 2022, it's about $14 to $15 million. So it's something we really have to plan for and ensure that we have the funds to cover. And so we were able to do that in 2022. I don't know if it's as a result, but hopefully in connection with those reserve fund transfers, we were able to earn an upgrade from Moody's Investor Services, which is one of the largest bond rating agencies in the world. They upgraded us from the A3 category or A1, to double A3. And it was the first time that the city had received an upgrade from Moody's in over a decade. And that last upgrade was really because they changed their scale, not because they thought that we were in a better position. The last time we received an upgrade because they really thought that we were fundamentally in a better financial position was in the 90s. So really great accomplishment by the city to earn that upgrade. And it really has a long-term impact on our financial condition in that it lowers the cost of the money that we borrow, and we borrow frequently to pay for things such as construction of rec centers, roads, things like that. On the operational side, just a few highlights to mention. We delivered approximately 7,000 new waste carts to residents, which is great. As a resident, it's wonderful to see. We installed 14 speed tables as part of a pilot program to reduce unsafe driving across the city. We also went down the path of a pilot program to deal with vacant lots, where we all know that they're a challenge to deal with. They often have overgrown grass and weeds, and there are so many of them that it's a real challenge for everyone to wrap their arms around. And so the Department of Public Works started a pilot program to plant clover in those lots to see if that clover will overtake the weeds in the grass, and the clover does not grow so high it does not need to be cut, which hopefully it works, and we'll see a real market improvement in the visible condition of the neighborhoods that we all live in. That pilot was started with 10 lots, 5 on the east side, 5 on the west side, and if it proves successful, will be scaled across the city over the next several years. We resumed recycling, which is great. It was an opt-in program, and we had about 60,000 households opt in to the recycling work, so that's been terrific to see. The Department of Aging served 1,255 residents through its chore program, which involves grass cutting, leaf raking, and snow shoveling for seniors in the city. And the number of residents served was a 10% increase over what we did in 2021. And then finally, we're fortunate to reach new labor contracts with the police and fire unions and several other unions that operate within the city. We continue to work with the others, but getting those resolved was a really big milestone for us to keep the city moving forward. And it was great to see us be in a position to offer wage increases in the course of those negotiations. So there's a lot of work left to do, of course, but I thought it would be helpful to highlight some of the work that we are doing and have done over the last year, work that is supported directly by the budget and the numbers that we're going to go through in these slides. So we'll turn to the slides. I think the first few slides are really informational on the budget process, where the money comes from, and what it goes to in general terms. So the city's overall operating budget in the mayor's estimate, which we delivered to council today, is about $1.95 billion. This is made up of 6 different funds. So we have the general fund, which supports sort of the general city operations, public works, public safety, the health department, law department, et cetera. The primary source of money for the general fund is income tax, which comprises approximately 66% of the general fund. The next is property tax, and then there's charges for services, building permits, things like that, all down the line. The next is enterprise funds. So this is the Division of Water, Cleveland Public Power, Water Pollution Control, the airport are the major enterprises. And then there are smaller enterprises, the cemeteries, Highland Golf Course, Public Auditorium, the West Side Market, and our parking facilities, our off-street parking facilities. The common thread with all of these, whether the big ones or the small ones, the technical terms, is that they operate like businesses. So they provide services and charge fees for those services, and the revenue is ideally self-supporting for the operation. One important point to note is that with the enterprise funds, their revenue cannot come to the general fund. It has to stay with the enterprise. General fund money can and sometimes does go to the enterprise funds as a subsidy to support their operations. On the right-hand side of the slide, we have a variety of other funds. They're generally a derivative of the general fund or the enterprise funds. So for example, the internal service funds, these are internal city operations that serve the city's departments. And so to support the costs of operating those operations, there's a fee assessed to each of the departments and divisions that use the service. So, for example, we have a print shop. If a department needs, for example, a very large budget book printed, we make that request of the print shop, and then they do it, and they charge us for that work. And the same goes for any other department. Next is the special revenue funds. This is, the biggest one of these is our streets construction fund. And this is a special revenue fund because it's a combination of city funds and state funds that go into the streets construction, maintenance, and repair fund to provide for all the streets work that the city does on an annual basis. The debt service fund does what the name suggests. It pays principal and interest on the city's debt. And so that could be general fund debt, airport, water, CPP, et cetera. And then the agency fund is a single entity. It's our central collection agency, which handles income tax collection for the city, but also for a variety of other municipalities across the state that have contracted with CCA to be their income tax collector. And CCA generates its own revenue from that service by charging a fee to each of the municipalities for which it collects income tax. So 1.9 billion is quite a bit of money. And there's revenue, as we'll get to later in the slides, there's revenue that matches those expenses. And so, I know a question that I get regularly, and I know colleagues get, is, isn't there more that we can do as a city to promote more activity, to generate more construction, things like that? I think, as we'll see in later slides, it's not as straightforward as it might seem, partly because that we can't transfer money from the enterprise funds to the general fund, for one. But also, we have to consider a lot of factors when we're going through the budget process. So, we, like any other business, have to deal with rising costs. We also have had to deal with, over the last several decades, declining population and declining employment within the city. And the declining employment within the city is the real one of the biggest challenges on the income tax side because of our reliance on income tax. And even when you go outside of the city, the county has also lost population over the last several decades and employment. And so when you sort of look to where people might be commuting in from, we're also losing residents and businesses on that front as well. And then also just things that are happening in the world. For example, with the war in Ukraine, natural gas prices were quite high over the last year. We buy a lot of natural gas, and that is an unexpected occurrence that we have to be able to take on in the event that it happens. And so we have to be mindful of unexpected events occurring at any given point throughout the year. We don't have to go that far back in time to think to, spring of 2020 when something happened that, nobody other than the makers of the movie Contagion would have predicted happening. And then also there's, issues down in Columbus, state law changes, and, those are items that we have a little more ability to control, where we can be actively engaged in the legislative process down in Columbus, but absolutely can present risks to us that we may not be able to totally mitigate on our own. So with all the money that goes into the budget, there are really three primary ways that we spend it: staff, programming, and then capital expenditures. Staff comprises 73% of our general fund budget. And so when we're looking at the general fund specifically, programming would basically be the balance of it. So we're spending 73 cents of every dollar on our staff through compensation, wages, and benefits. And then the other 27 cents are there for contractual services that we might need, equipment we might need to rent, supplies we'll need to buy, things like that. On the capital side, the relationship is a bit more indirect. We don't pay for a lot of capital directly out of the general fund, but what we do is use general fund revenue to pay principal and interest on debt that we have taken on to pay for capital. So it's in there. It's just not as clear if you look at the budget book to see the connection between our income tax, property tax collections, and the capital work that the city does. And so here are, really just a few examples of some of the larger recipients of general fund dollars. And there's a chart on one of the upcoming slides that gives a visual of this. But public safety and public works, which are our two biggest departments, make up 66% of our general fund budget. And you see each of the four items up there are part of either public safety or public works. So now we're getting to this year's general fund budget, and we'll go through a couple of charts here and then talk a little bit off of the slides. So here is our expense estimate for 2023 of $710,751,206 for the general fund. And I understand this is probably a bit hard to read. It was hard to get this in any condition that was readable, but really just want to illustrate the point that if you look at the bottom green portion of the pie, the public safety, and then up to the left, public works, that's where you see it's about 66% of the general fund budget. The next biggest component of the general fund is the subsidies and other administrative costs, and that is our transfer to debt service. So that's where you see the capital aspect of the budget come in, subsidies to some of the smaller enterprises and one of the major enterprises to help them balance their books each year. And then the rest is kind of just internal facing operations. And then the next biggest would be judicial branch at 6%. So that's the municipal court, the housing court, and the clerk of courts. Okay, so we just went over expenses. Now this chart goes over revenues. And so we have projected revenues for 2023 of $710,976,488, which if you compare this slide and the last one, that gets us our $225,000 excess in our structural balance. And really just noting the predominance of income tax as one of the sources of our revenue. No other source tops over 6%, but with property tax being the next. So we have become over the years much more reliant on income tax than we were 20 years ago. I think 20 years ago, this chart would have shown about 53% of our revenue from income tax, with property tax a little higher. So just for context, we collected just under $45 million in property tax in 2022. That number is below what we collected in 2004 in real dollars. So, really wanted to, make a few points about the budget that we have proposed to council. As I mentioned, it's structurally balanced by approximately $225,000. And, that's from a starting point last year of a $62 million structural deficit. So it's quite a shift. And really we were able to get there in a couple of ways. One, a bit of luck. Our revenue in 2022 came in better than we had anticipated. And that was largely driven by income tax. Some of our other revenue streams were up, some were down, but income tax was up about 7.5% over what we had budgeted. Overall, we were up about 6.4% over what we budgeted. So that was, on the good side, we were able to just sort of, the tide rose, and so we were able to rise with it. But that wasn't going to be enough to get us to a structural balance. So, during budget hearings last year, there was a lot of talk about all the number of vacancies that were in the budget with City Council, and their concern that the path that we were on was not sustainable with all those budgeted positions. And so we went through a process in building the budget and identified 257 vacant positions that could be removed from the budget and help us get to that structural balance, which is really where we need to be to put us on a stable footing for the future, so that the city is able to accomplish the things that the mayor and council really are seeking to accomplish. These positions were vacant. No one lost their job in this process. We remain we continue to have I think it's something around 600 vacant positions in the budget. So there are vacancies. Our divisions and departments can hire, they can grow, and they can do that with the confidence that we can actually support it. So I think the challenging position we were in last year in particular with the deficit that we had was we would have been in a lot of trouble if we filled every one of those positions. It would have been really difficult to stand up here today and provide a budget that is balanced, if not impossible. And so with the headcount numbers that we have in this year's budget, we can act with a bit more confidence. We can really work diligently to fill the vacancies that we need to fill so that we can provide the services that residents expect and need from us. On one hand, we did reduce the headcount. On the other, we did invest in certain organizations in the general fund to help pursue some of the mayor's key priorities. So one example is we added 7 positions to the Department of Health's Division of Health Equity and Social Justice. We also created the Division of Risk Management in the Department of Finance to really provide a global view on the risks that the city faces as an organization and provide leadership on mitigating that risk, however it manifests. The Department of Public Safety within the Division of Police intends to hire several civilian investigators to work in the police districts to support the uniformed officers in pursuing their investigative work, to allow the uniformed personnel to continue to be out doing their core police work with the support of some dedicated personnel. And we also added positions in traffic engineering and the Mayor's Office of Capital Projects to support the Vision Zero initiative and the Mayor's transit and mobility efforts across the city. Another thing that we've done in this year's budget is nearly every division has included output metrics in the budget book itself. Those metrics differ from organization to organization, but they are intended to give the public, anyone who's interested in getting a better understanding of our operations, that kind of insight into what that division does, what that division thinks is important, and how their productivity and output should be measured. So it is my hope that it provides a welcome bit of transparency to our operations as a city. It's a work in progress. This was the first time we've done anything like this, so I expect the The delivery of this information will likely change in the future, but the spirit behind it will continue and will become a key part of this process going forward. And then the last thing that I would add on this point is, if you step back and take a view of what we've done holistically with this year's mayor's estimate, it's the beginning of a multi-step process. So, getting to a point where we can just simply structurally balance is terrific, particularly given the financial debt challenges that the city faced starting in March of 2020 and on through. So it puts us in a great position for the future. There's still more to do. What we don't do in this book is we don't put more money toward the rainy day. We don't put more money aside toward capital. And those are things that I think over time in succeeding budget cycles we will want to do as we continue to refine and really make the budget as efficient as possible to allow us to be in a position to invest in our future while also providing the basic services that we're expected to provide. So I'm very excited for this budget and for the process. And I've got just a couple other slides, and then I'll open it up to any questions anyone has. And really, this slide here is just to give folks a sense of the process itself. So we begin preparing for the budget in early September, or at least we did this year. This is my first time going through it. And we request information from the divisions and departments, and the staff in the Office of Budget Management begins to put together what becomes the budget book. In December, we do a variety of we go through a variety of legislative steps to close out the fiscal year with a balanced budget, which we're required to do under state law, to make the temporary appropriation we need for the first quarter of the fiscal year, and then to add any supplemental appropriation we need to sort of make things work for the remainder of that year. And we go to February. Today, we deliver the mayor's estimate to council. The budget will have its first reading at, I think, the meeting on the 13th. Don't quote me on that. And then budget hearings will begin on February 14th. And the hearings will go from February 14th to February 24th. Budget must be adopted by April 1st under state law. And then once the budget is adopted, we will produce the final budget book sometime in April and make it available to the public. So just a closing slide, just kind of the road ahead, really reiterating some of the points that I've already made. Really am proud of the work we did this year, both within the finance department, but also, in collaboration with our colleagues across the city to make the moves needed to balance the budget. Also really proud that we didn't have to use any one-time money to do that. It really is income and expenses are lined up for the first time since 2020 in our budget book. And really just puts us in a position for future success as an organization. There are a lot of opportunities out there, as many are, I'm sure, familiar with the federal government, with the American Rescue Plan, Inflation Reduction Act, and the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act. There's also the CHIPS Act. There's all kinds of stuff coming out of DC that provides funding for a variety of initiatives, and we are working across the organization to identify which of those opportunities make sense for us, and then taking the steps necessary to pursue them. And then, I already went through the accomplishments, so I won't do that again, but just, again, a few of those. So with that, I'll answer any questions you have. Thanks, Leo. Yeah.
When you were mentioning special revenue, that's for street construction, is that also for all forms of transportation?
No, it's just for streets.
So then where would transit or like the scooters or bikes, where would that fall under in terms of the funds?
So transit would be under the Regional Transit Authority. And scooters, those are privately operated devices. Yes?
What was the most important thing you've learned now that you're going first budget hearing 10 days in to budget hearing 1 year in?
I don't know if I'll ever feel prepared. There's so much information that I'm more prepared than I was last time because I'd been here for 5 days before the last set of budget hearings started. But it may be more substantively to answer the question. The scope of the budget is really something, particularly when you look beyond the general fund and kind of all that the enterprise funds do, large and small, and how the internal service funds, the special revenue funds, and the agency funds all kind of fit together. It's really an interesting it's an interesting document. It's a very interesting topic to me. Yes.
With the Fed raising the interest rates, like they just raised them today, how does that impact us as the city?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So in general, it makes goods more expensive because we're not the only ones affected by the rate increase. So any organization that makes things that we need to buy now has to charge more money to cover their costs. More directly, it makes the cost of borrowing money more expensive. And that could be with a new debt issuance that we would do in 2023, but it could also be for, we have some outstanding debt that is on kind of 3 to 5 year reset cycles. And so, depending on when those have to get reset and what the Fed might do over the next 6 to 12 months, that reset could be much more expensive than we anticipated, 2 years ago when we, entered into the current product. So it could impact us directly and indirectly, and it could be quite significant depending on, what time horizon we're looking at. If we borrow if we do a 30-year debt issuance at today's rates, at say $50 million, that debt issuance is going to cost several $1 million more than it would have a year ago. Yeah.
Speaking of debt, what are some of the biggest things that Cleveland is holding debt for?
Specific projects. So the police headquarters is a large one. We generally, when we issue debt, it's not dedicated to specific projects. The police headquarters is unique in that sense. Usually when we issue general obligation or subordinate lien income tax bonds, it's for a variety of categories. So it would be public facilities, roads and bridges, recreation, and vehicles are usually the categories. And the amounts devoted to each category it varies by year depending on the needs. Yes?
Is the state budget and the city budget on the same caliber?
They are not. The state's fiscal year is July 1 to June 30, and they budget on a 2-year basis. And we are calendar year and annually appropriated.
Would you be able to explain for us, because obviously this is going to get a lot of attention, the decision to eliminate some vacant headcount in the general fund? How did you arrive at the decision to cut the number you did and to do it where you did?
Yeah, so we started with the premise of maintaining the relative proportion of the general fund for each organization. So say if, here, and we can go back. Right, so, we can look at public safety. It's 53.7% of the general fund in this year's proposed budget. In last year's proposed budget, it was 54.1. And we really tried to keep those percentages consistent from 2022 to 2023. We weren't able to do that exactly for a couple of reasons. One, we did not reduce headcount in city council or the mayor's office. We also did not reduce headcount in the Division of Fire because the Division of Fire is fully staffed, and that would have required actually laying people off, which was sort of a decision that was made that we were not going to do that. And then, some divisions took a larger proportion of the reduced headcount than others. So, for example, in the finance director's office, I think we removed 7 positions out of 12. I think that's right. But that doesn't mean those 7 positions just vanished. We created the division of risk, and some of those went to the division of risk. So it's not the cleanest math, but generally what we tried to do is to keep each organization's proportion of the budget consistent as best as we could. Oh, sorry.
A question about the enterprise fund. Are expenses like labor and materials and things that are needed to run the Department of Public Utilities, et cetera, are those things paid for out of the enterprise fund?
Yes. Yeah. So the enterprise funds really operate in a box, and they're part of the city, so they're part of this book, and they have to go through the legislative process with city council and follow other administrative processes. But they rely on their sources of revenue to cover their operations, whether it be personnel or materials.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Where does the casino revenue funds fall
Into the general fund. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm new to this. So you hear the council people talking about how they want to divvy up the general fund for the different projects and different inputs, but it seems like it's already divvied up this way prior to the year. How do those two work throughout the year? I guess I'm confused on why council people are delegating money out and where that's coming from, if it's already allocated.
So if we're talking specifically about casino funds, when casinos were created in Ohio, I think it was a ballot initiative in 2009. And then, the casinos were developed. There was a deal struck essentially between the administration and council on what to do with that revenue that comes in. Casinos are taxed at I think 33% of their revenue is taxed and comes to the local level, the home city of the casino. So in this case, the Jack for us. And that split that was negotiated, I believe it was in 2011, was 85% to the general fund, 15% to city council. And so the 15% goes, it doesn't hit the general fund, it goes straight into a council fund, and then is divided by 17 among each of the members for them to allocate based on the criteria that was set out in the ordinance that set this up, and then they have a set of sort of guidelines that go along with the ordinance. The recent discussion was really about two things. One, easing some of the restrictions on how council can allocate those funds, and then two, reapportioning the allocation to be 50-50 between the general fund and council. Yes?
How much funds do they allocate to all the councilmen and their wards, like out of the general fund? What would be the primary goal that they give, like 100,000, 700,000 each quarterly, or is it just based on the year budget?
So it depends on, for a casino, for example, it's on the actual revenue. So we take the full amount of the casino tax that would come to the city, and I think it's remitted quarterly, but I'm not certain of that. And then based on the actual dollars that would be remitted, 15% of that is for council. So say it's $1 million, right? 150,000 would be for council, and then that 150,000 would be divided by 17 for each of the wards. Yeah.
Now, I just seen that they just, the mayor is proposing to close out positions as far as in the Department of Cleveland Work and the Building Housing. Is that saying in the point of job take out, or is they adding more jobs?
So we believe in public works and in building housing, we have eliminated some headcount, vacant positions in those departments, yes.
So as far as for the new budget, by the way, is the new budget for the 23rd of April coming, or that's when they put out the new budget book?
So the final budget book will be out sometime in April, after council adopts the final budget.
Okay, so in other words, if he's cutting the budget in that area or proposing to, what would that fund add up to? It'll go to the general funding, or would it allocate to public? Stimulus.
Yeah, so I think what we're doing here with reducing some of the vacant positions is taking, in combination with our increased revenue in 2022, taking these reduced positions so that we can balance out our budget. And so it's not that there's going to be a whole lot of extra money floating around because we made these headcount reductions. It's that we're able to present a budget that says these are the revenues that are going to come in, that we anticipate coming in. These are our costs that we anticipate having, and they equal, which is not something we've been able to do for 3 years.
Paying commercial taxes, when they pull all that money in from, like you're saying, like what is 50-some% of the property tax? So who's able to utilize that type of tax funds to the different areas over the year? Like, who will we go to see who allocate that funds to the public?
In terms of, maybe I can go, in terms of this, if we're looking at this slide?
Yes.
I think this is the money that goes into the general fund. So I think a good analogy with respect to the general fund, and this came up in a council discussion last week, is so we're able to identify the source when it comes in, but once it goes into the general fund, I am completely unable to tell you, well, income tax paid for this, casino tax paid for that. It's like we all have a cup of water and we pour it into a pitcher, and it's just one pitcher.
And they allocate.
And so all of this really just becomes one pitcher of dollars that pays for public safety, pays for public works, building and housing, all down the line.
Do they have any funding where they, for the new year, people in the different wards to be able to use some of the American rescue funds, where there be funds available for them to build new housing?
Council did appropriate in the fall about $30 million for housing funding.
Because I did see the one with the high school, junior high school, Harry Davis. They building that now. I went over there, and it's looking nice. I can see the improvement. I'm trying to see who are the people that I need to go talk to, and the outcome of building two senior citizen homes out of the funding, if there's enough available. You know what I'm saying? I have property in lots. I wanted to see how you go about with funding they have to help facilitate that type of structure.
Okay.
Construction. But I can see the mayor doing so. I like the word when he say transparent. I really do.
That's the goal.
Yes, I really do.
Thank you.